Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know, Mike McCallum passed, and it's really taken me a few days to process the information. This is one of the great fighters of my life. Let me just point out, too, um, I'm Jamaican. I was raised in a very Jamaican family. I spent years in speech therapy at school because I heard I sounded too much like I just hopped off the boat. Um, Somewhere along the line, I lost my accent, unfortunately. Well, let me just say, I spent my childhood watching Olympic Games and international competitions, rooting for Jamaican athletes, right? And let's just say it's rare when you're from what we used to call the third world. I know generations have changed. But for mine, we talked about the third world, right? 96 degrees in the shade. And, along comes Mike McCallum in the 1980s. And I know time, you can't tell what fights are going to be remembered, what the big moments were in the sport. What I want people to understand is that Julian Jackson was viewed like a Mike Tyson. Right? Jackson truly looked unbeatable. And then he faced the body snatcher, the technician, Mike McCallum. And McCallum made him look limited. You started to realize that even a power punching mid range hooker was no match for a guy who had the timing down to the point where he could hit you to the body from in the pocket, in between your hooks. Right? McCallum was really a revelation for me. Right? So Jamaica has other fighters. I don't want people to overlook Shrimpy Clark. I don't want people to overlook the Axeman Nicholas Walters. And of course, you have Jamaicans who, have left the country and distinguished themselves elsewhere. Right? Lennox Lewis, I see you clearly, great fighter. Dillian White, Jamaican roots. Right? Jamaica has had many guys in the limelight. Few guys were as smooth as Mike McCallum. Right? I remember Mike McCallum's matchups against James Toney. Right? Wow, those were classic matchups. You understood then that you were watching the sport at its best. Right? So I want to encourage everyone here to go back and look at the body snatcher in one of boxing's better moments. Dillian White. Again, if you're Jamaican, you know who the body snatcher was, particularly if you're into boxing. Dillian White started calling himself the body snatcher. Right? Different generation. I think Jamaicans all understood that that was in part an homage to Mike McCallum. Let me say this too. I'm a Roy Jones fan. It wasn't until Jones beat an older Mike McCallum that I started to understand how good Roy was. In other words, in a fight between Roy Jones, who was young at the time, and Mike McCallum, right, this viewer viewed Mike McCallum as the standard. Right? Great fighter. He's missed. If you're Jamaican, he's the gold standard in many ways for Jamaican boxers. Let's talk about another guy. And this guy's also a favorite of mine. Right? He's one of the best I've seen. He even had some losses, but they were interesting losses. where you looked at the fight and you thought, this could be scored a different way. Lomachenko is walking away from the sport at 37. The truth is, 37 at 135 pounds makes you an old man, right? 135 is not the heavyweight division. The truth also is that there's always a young guy out there someplace, right? Always. And that, a vet who's had a good career really has to pick a point in time where they say, that's it for me, because you can't fight every young guy. So let's remember, Lomachenko fought Rigondeaux, right? Lomachenko, last two fights were two of his best, right? He fought Devin Haney. Understand, Devin Haney for him is an annuity. Devin Haney is still unbeaten, right? Nobody has beaten Devin Haney without Osterin in their system, right? So Haney is unbeaten, right? I thought Haney edged Lomachenko. But understand, you had Devin Haney in his 20s fighting a guy in his mid-30s. And the best we could say on the Devin Haney side of the ledger is that Haney may have edged it. That's the best. It was the old man who came roaring back in that fight. Let me say, too, I thought the Kambosos fight, where Kambosos' father is in Kambosos' corner, was one of the most compelling boxing stories I've seen. Right? Lomachenko goes to Australia and was just too good. You saw the skill gap between the two guys, and Kambosos, of course, is a guy who beat Teofimo Lopez. Kambosos is a guy who's been champion. And here was an old man in his last fight, looking spectacular. Right, so I understand. Lomachenko never fought Shakur, never fought Gervonta, never fought Keyshawn. Right, folks? Let's just say, looking at his career, that he fought many, and he held his own. Right, this is a guy, I mentioned the Axeman, Nicholas Walters. Lomachenko was so good. I mean, we forget how these fights came to be. Walters was chopping everyone down. And Lomachenko was so good that he wasn't only outboxing guys. He was not only winning the fight clearly on the scorecards, but he was causing guys to quit. In one of the ultimate tributes in boxing, we started calling Loma Noma, because guys were in too deep. They were drowning against him. Right? Walters, you might recall, beat Nonito Donaire. And here he was against Lomachenko, helpless. That's such riveting fight footage that Lomachenko starts being the guy on his front foot against a home run hitter in Nicholas Walters. Right, so let me just say, the sport really has lost two great fighters. Right, McCallum, granted, McCallum, older generation, right? He had retired, but he was still around the sport. He's in a boxing city. Las Vegas, look at me. I'm still talking about him in present tense. That's how big the aura was, right? And, of course, Lomachenko. The fact that I'm mentioning the biggest names out there, Shakur, Gervonta, Keyshawn, and I'm mentioning them and talking about a 37-year-old guy who isn't even in their age range, shows you how good Lomachenko is. I'm sure many of us, particularly after seeing Loma against Devin Haney, would love to see him against Shakur, Gervonta, and Keyshawn. Let's switch gears up here. Let's talk about some fights coming up. Let's talk about some events coming up. Now, politics is part of life, right? There's certain people out there who you have to hang on every word they say because they're nuanced, right? People can't openly say, I disagree with the President of the United States. Like, by the way, and I give this guy credit, he's one of my favorite people in the public arena, Elon Musk is doing right now, right? Musk is obviously outraged about the big beautiful bill, which is weak, right? I consider the big beautiful bill weak. We'll talk about that in a high risk video. But let me just say, so Tim Tszyu was asked about the upcoming fight between Mario Barrios, who's a champion at 147. Right? Tszyu, of course, is at 154. Barrios is a big guy. You see Barrios at 147 and you think to yourself, how's this guy making 147? Well, they asked Tim Tszyu, right, about who's going to win, Mario Barrios versus a guy from an older generation, Manny Pacquiao. Right? Now, Tim Tszyu was candid. Tim Tszyu said that he just thought Manny was too old. Right? He said he just didn't see how Manny would be able to pull it off. But that because Manny is Manny, great fighter, several belts in several weight classes, anything was possible. But it was clear Tim Tszyu was, leaning toward Mario Barrios. Now here's what I need for people to consider. They ask fighters who are on the same card. Right? Tim Tszyu is fighting Sebastian Fundora on the same card as Manny Pacquiao, Mario Barrios. Right? So they ask a guy involved in the event who has a vested interest in selling tickets. Right? They ask him, hey, who's going to win this fight? And the guy tells you that the lesser known guy, right? All respect to Mario Barrios, who's been a multiple division champion, but Manny Pacquiao's better known than him. Right? They ask him, wow, who's going to win this fight? And Tim Tszyu gives you the promoter-friendly answer. Right? He says, the lesser known guy is a live underdog in the fight. That's basically, actually Barrios is favored, right? But Tim Tszyu here, is he telling you who he thinks is going to win? Or is he selling tickets? Right? When you're a boxing fan and you're looking for advice from a fighter, ask yourself a few questions. Right? Is that fighter fighting on the same card? Might they have an agenda in terms of selling tickets? Right? Another question to ask, doesn't apply here, is, is this fighter part of the same promotional group? Right, folks? If the fighter has the same trainer as the guy you're asking him about, if the fighter has the same manager as the guy you're asking him about, then get real. The answer you get might be political. Let's go one step further. If Mario Barrios beats Manny Pacquiao, and Barrios says, man, I'm tired of this weight cut, and he jumps up to 154, isn't Tim Tszyu on the short list of guys Barrios might want to fight? Wouldn't that be a guy with box office after beating Manny Pacquiao in an anticipated fight in Pacquiao's return to the sport against, the son of a Hall of Famer who's known, right, who, has fought in title fights at 154. Right, what we have to do, if you're a hardcore fan of boxing, is you have to look at guys and you have to seriously think, wow, if Mario Barrios might move up to 154, how much weight am I going to put behind a prediction from a guy at 154 who might be a future opponent? Right, folks? This is professional prize fighting. Tim Tszyu is not only looking for belts, he's looking for paydays. He wants credible opponents. Right? If Mario Barrios, who is a champion right now, beats Manny Pacquiao, he's a credible opponent at 154. That's a box office fight. Everyone gets paid. Fans want to see that. There'll be a group of Manny Pacquiao fans who then see their guy against Mario Barrios, are introduced to Mario Barrios, and if Barrios looks exciting, looks fun to watch, beats Pacquiao on the merits, they might want to watch future Mario Barrios fights. So let's just say I was laughing out loud when I was reading an article where an interviewer asked a guy on the Mario Barrios Manny Pacquiao card who's going to win that fight. Right, folks? That was ridiculous. Let's talk about Teofimo Lopez here. We have another article in the news where apparently they went over to Teofimo, the they being Turkey Al-Sheikh, Riyadh season, and they offered him a fight against Keyshawn Davis. Right now, folks, what I need for people to understand is Teofimo Lopez, who is a champion at 140, is talking about leaving the division to fight Jaron Ennis or to fight Devin Haney. Think about Teofimo Lopez versus Devin Haney for a moment. Both of those guys had belts at 140. Now they're fighting at other weights. So, folks, Keyshawn Davis is one of the best. I think he's underrated. I don't dispute that. But you have to finish the sentence. He's one of the best at what weight class? Not 147. So they approach Teofimo Lopez, who's having problems staying at 147. This is a guy who, is trying to move up in weight. And they're offering him one of the toughest guys, at his old weight class. What do you expect the guy to say? Right? Understand, the guy, was all set up to fight Devin Haney. In other words, the guy is not just talking about moving up in weight. He actually was prepared to do so. So, of course, Keyshawn is quoted in the piece I read, and these pieces are online, that he thought Teofimo was afraid to fight him. Folks, to me, this is like a cruiserweight coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, you know what? Usyk was offered money to fight me. Usyk doesn't want any of this. Hey, let me say this. When a guy leaves the weight class, it's amazing how much hair that puts on the chest of the guys who want to fight him at the weight class he's left. Right? Teofimo Lopez, granted, I think the guy needs to grow up a bit. But let's be real here. Teofimo has a lot of big-time talents in the sport. Devin Haney among them, inching at the opportunity to fight him. Right? When a guy's a champ in a weight class and he decides to move up, that tells you, whether the guy tells you directly or not, that the guy's having problems making weight. Right? As you get older, those weight cuts can become more devastating. Right? So to me, it's very funny when a guy says, hey, I want to fight the champ at 147, Jaron Ennis. I'm willing to fight Devin Haney at a catch weight, 145. And then guys who are at 135 and 140 are saying, hey, he was offered money to fight me. If he's moving up in weight, why would he stick around to fight you? Let's get real. Anyway, we have a jam-packed summer. You have a lot of great fights. I'm excited over this Fabio Wardley Justice Honey fight. I think people need to pay close attention to that fight. Let me say this too. This is just a tradition in boxing. Guys from an older generation always want you to believe that their fighters would beat the current fighters. Right? I myself have a Ring Magazine JPEG up on gamblersadvisory.com, a site I run, about a mythical fight between Ray Leonard and Floyd Mayweather. Right? So not surprisingly, there are many people, let me raise my hand, who believe Manny Pacquiao, who's a big underdog, has a real chance against Mario Barrios. Right? Even at 46, coming back at 147. Right? You heard me say that 37 was old at 135. You can imagine how old 46 is at any weight class. But yet, Manny Pacquiao is coming back. Pacquiao, if he beats Mario Barrios, wants to fight Gervonta Davis next. Right? Let me say too, life's unfair. How many guys want to fight Gervonta Davis? He has a fight with Lamont Roach. He has a huge payday fight if he wants it against Manny Pacquiao. If Pacquiao wins, understand, Pacquiao Barrios is for the title. Pacquiao would have a title. He'd be the champ at 147. Talk about legacy for Gervonta Davis if Davis were to fight Pacquiao and beat Pacquiao. But of course, you also have the Jake Paul factor. Right? Jake Paul, whatever you think of Jake Paul. And I know there's a group of you out there who believe he's a dilettante, believe he's not serious, believe it is insulting to boxing to talk about Jake Paul with real active fighters. Right? But folks, Jake Paul is box office. Right? Again, this is professional prize fighting. Canelo was close to signing to fight Jake Paul. Understand, when they make an offer to you and you're looking at the contract and you're thinking, wow, are they really going to pay me this much money? Then you find out how much Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson generated. Then you find out that, the Jake Paul name might be able to get you on Netflix. Right? Fighters have to take that seriously. It's not just about the belts. It's about the purses. Right? It's professional prize fighting, not amateur prize fighting. The money matters here. So Gervonta Davis, rightly or wrongly, whether or not you've been impressed with his recent fights, whether or not you think he's better than Shakur, whether you think he's better than Keyshawn, whether you think he's better, let's throw some new names in the mix, than Richardson Hitchens, right, at 140. Whether you think he can hang at 140. Just understand, he's a guy who, because he has been a part himself of cash cow events, right? That Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis fight, folks, neither guy financially had to fight again to support their families after that fight, right? Just understand, life's unfair, whatever you and I think. Gervonta Davis is in demand, including from Hall of Famers like Manny Pacquiao. Let me hear your thoughts. I hope you leave them in the comments section of this YouTube video. Right? I'm guessing if Gervonta Davis agrees to gain weight to fight the winner of Mario Barrios, who, by the way, Davis has already beaten, right? And Manny Pacquiao. I'm guessing after Davis announces he's moving up in weight for that fight, Keyshawn is going to say, hey, Davis was offered money to fight me and he's avoiding me at 135. Such is life, such is the sport we love. I look forward to your comments. Thanks for stopping by.